The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on Fran G's ashen, pockmarked skin. He shuffled down the sterile corridor of Smythe Vessen's headquarters, his stubby legs struggling to keep pace with the bustling activity around him. At a mere 1.5 meters tall, Fran G was dwarfed by the sleek, towering aliens that brushed past him, their appendages laden with the latest in personal protection weaponry. Fran G's breath came in wheezes, his rotund body jiggling with each labored step. A few wisps of hair clung desperately to his scarred scalp, a pitiful reminder of a once proud lineage. As he navigated the maze-like halls, the last surviving member of an ancient race that had once commanded respect across the galaxy now elicited little more than bemused glances and wrinkled noses. "Watch it, fossil!" a lanky Zygonian snapped as Fran G inadvertently bumped into him. The force of the collision sent Fran G stumbling backward, his flabby arms flailing for balance. My apologies," Fran G stammered, his raspy voice barely audible above the cacophony of the busy corridor. He quickly shuffled to the side, pressing himself against the wall to avoid further collisions. As he caught his breath, Fran G's gaze drifted to a nearby window. The view beyond was a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in every corner of the galaxy. Sleek ships darted between towering skyscrapers, their hulls bristling with defensive armaments. On the streets far below, beings of all shapes and sizes hurried along, many sporting visible sidearms or more discreet personal protection devices. Fran G sighed, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his sample case. Another sales trip loomed before him, another journey into the unknown reaches of the galaxy to peddle Smythe Vessen's latest creations. He'd lost count of how many such trips he'd undertaken in his long, unremarkable career. "Fran G!" a booming voice echoed down the corridor. "Get your decrepit hide to the transport bay. Your beamer's prepped and ready." Fran G winced at the harsh tone of his supervisor, a burly Craxon named Grolthor. "Yes, sir. On my way, sir," he called back, his voice cracking with the effort. He hurried as best he could towards the transport bay, his sample case banging against his stubby legs with each waddling step. As he entered the cavernous space, his eyes widened at the sight before him. The beamer, Smythe Vessen's proprietary matter transportation device, looked like it had seen better days. Its once gleaming surface was now a patchwork of dents and hastily applied repair tape. The company logo, a stylized weapon crossed with a credit chip, had been slapped on haphazardly, barely covering a series of blinking warning lights. "She's all yours, Relic," Grolthor grunted, giving Fran G a none-too-gentle shove towards the dilapidated machine. "Try not to break it, or yourself." Fran G stumbled forward, his knees wobbling as he approached the beamer. He cast a nervous glance at the control panel, where more warning lights blinked an angry red. Sir? Are you certain this is safe?" Grolthor's multiple eyes narrowed dangerously. "You questioning company equipment, Fran G? Maybe you'd rather I find someone else for this assignment? Someone younger, perhaps? More capable?" No, sir." Fran G quickly backpedaled, both literally and figuratively. "It's perfectly fine, sir. Top-notch equipment, as always." "That's what I thought," Grolthor sneered. "Now get in there and make some sales. The quota's been doubled this quarter, and I won't have some washed-up relic like you dragging down my numbers." Fran G nodded meekly and began loading his sample case into the beamer. As he did so, he couldn't help but notice the strong smell of ozone emanating from the machine. Definitely not a good sign. "Sir," he ventured cautiously, "might I inquire as to my destination for this trip?" Grolthor consulted a datapad, his tentacles dancing across its surface. Let's see. Ah, yes. You're headed to the Zeta Reticuli system. Big weapons expo happening on one of the outer moons. Lots of potential buyers, so don't screw this up. Frangi's already pale skin seemed to lose what little color it had left. Zeta Reticuli? But sir, that's notoriously dangerous territory. The local warlords are— Are you refusing an assignment, Frangi? Grolthor's voice dropped to a menacing growl. No, sir. Of course not. Frangi quickly clambered into the beamer, his pudgy form barely fitting through the narrow opening. Zeta Reticuli it is. I'm sure it will be a wonderful trip. Grolthor's laugh was anything but reassuring. That's the spirit. Now get going, Fossil. Time is money, and you've already wasted enough of both. With a final, half-hearted wave, Frangi sealed the beamer's hatch. The interior was cramped and stuffy, made worse by the acrid smell of burning circuitry. Frangi's stubby fingers danced nervously over the control panel, inputting the coordinates for Zeta Reticuli. As the beamer hummed to life, a series of alarms began to blare. Red warning lights flashed urgently, and the entire machine began to vibrate with alarming intensity. "Oh dear," Frangi muttered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. "This can't be good." Outside, Grolthor watched with growing concern as the beamer's exterior began to glow an angry orange. Arcs of energy crackled across its surface, and the air filled with the smell of ozone and burning metal. "Frangi!" he shouted, pounding on the beamer's hull. "Abort the transport! Something's wrong!" But it was too late. With a blinding flash and a thunderous crack, the beamer vanished, taking a very frightened Frangi with it. For a moment there was absolute silence in the transport bay. Then slowly, Grolthor turned to face the wide-eyed technicians who had gathered to witness the spectacle. "Well," he said, his voice unnaturally calm, "I suppose we should inform management that we may have slightly exceeded our equipment maintenance budget this quarter." As the technicians scrambled to assess the damage and track Frangi's trajectory, the hapless salesman found himself hurtling through the fabric of space-time. The beamer's interior was a whirlwind of flashing lights and blaring alarms, punctuated by the occasional shower of sparks from overloaded circuits. Frangi clung desperately to his seat, his eyes squeezed shut and his mouth open in a silent scream. His considerable bulk jiggled and shook with each violent lurch of the malfunctioning machine. "Oh, ancestors," he whimpered. "If you can hear me, please let this end quickly, preferably without my molecules being scattered across half the galaxy." As if in response to his plea, the beamer gave one final bone-jarring shudder before going completely silent. The sudden absence of noise was almost as startling as the cacophony that had preceded it. Cautiously, Frangi cracked open one eye. The interior of the beamer was dark save for a few weakly flickering emergency lights. The acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled the air, making Frangi's already labored breathing even more difficult. "Well," he muttered to himself, "I suppose I should be grateful to have arrived somewhere in one piece." With trembling hands, Frangi reached for the hatch release. It took several attempts, his pudgy fingers slipping on the sweat-slicked lever before he finally managed to trigger the mechanism. The hatch swung open with a protesting groan, letting in a rush of cool, damp air. Frangi blinked rapidly, his eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden influx of light. As his vision cleared, he found himself staring out at a scene that was decidedly alien. Instead of the harsh, barren landscape of Zeta Reticuli's moons, Frangi was confronted with a bustling cityscape unlike anything he'd ever encountered. Strange, boxy vehicles trundled along paved roads, belching noxious fumes. Towering structures of glass and steel reached towards a sky that was an oddly vibrant shade of blue. And the beings! Frangi's eyes widened as he took in the crowd milling about near his landing site. They were bipedal, like many species he'd encountered, but their appearance was utterly foreign. Pale, smooth skin in a variety of hues, bizarre coverings on their bodies, and not a tentacle or exoskeleton in sight. "Oh my," Frangi breathed, his raspy voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think we're in Zeta Reticuli anymore." With great effort, Frangi heaved himself out of the beamer, his stubby legs barely reaching the ground. As he straightened up, wincing at the various aches and pains brought on by his rough journey, he became aware of the growing crowd of onlookers. The strange beings were pointing and murmuring amongst themselves, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Frangi noticed with some alarm that many of them were holding up small rectangular devices, pointing them in his direction. "Greetings, good beings," Frangi called out, activating his universal translator. "I come in peace. Might I inquire as to my current location?" The crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted in excited chatter. Frangi's translator struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire exchange, but he managed to catch snippets of conversation. "Did you hear that? It talks. Awesome cosplay, dude. Is this part of the convention?" Frangi's brow furrowed in confusion. Convention? Cosplay? These were terms his translator couldn't quite parse, but before he could ponder further, a booming voice cut through the crowd. "All right, folks, let's give our friend here some space. Security coming through." The crowd parted, revealing a group of stern-faced individuals in matching dark attire. They approached Frangi cautiously, hands hovering near objects on their hips that the salesman recognized with a start as primitive projectile weapons. "Sir," one of the security personnel addressed Frangi, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. This area is off-limits for convention activities." Frangi blinked in confusion. "Convention? I'm terribly sorry, but there seems to be some misunderstanding. I'm a traveling salesman for Smythe Vesson Armaments. I was en route to Zeta Reticuli when my transport malfunctioned." The security guard exchanged glances with his colleagues, a mix of amusement and exasperation on their faces. "Right," he said slowly. "Zeta Reticuli. Of course. Look, buddy, I appreciate the commitment to your character, but you can't just set up unauthorized displays in the middle of the street. Let's get you back inside the convention center, okay?" As the guards began to usher a very confused Frangi towards a large, brightly lit building, the salesman caught sight of a banner strung across the entrance. His eyes widened as he read the words emblazoned upon it. "Welcome to Bosticon 2024. "Oh dear," Frangi muttered, a sinking feeling settling in his ample stomach. "I have a feeling this sales trip is going to be more complicated than usual." Little did Frangi know just how prophetic those words would prove to be, as he waddled into a world of science fiction enthusiasts, cosplayers, and potential buyers who had no idea they were about to purchase very real, very dangerous alien weaponry. Frangi stumbled into the convention center, his bulbous eyes darting nervously from one bizarre sight to another. The cacophony of sounds, the riot of colors, and the press of bodies overwhelmed his senses. Humans of all shapes and sizes bustled about, many adorned in outlandish costumes that would have given even the most seasoned galactic traveler pause. "Great googly moogly," Frangi muttered, his universal translator struggling to keep up with the colorful Earth vernacular. "What manner of madness is this?" A towering figure in gleaming armor clanked past, followed by a group of small, furry creatures chirping excitedly. Frangie pressed himself against a wall, his gelatinous body quivering with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Hey, awesome blob alien cosplay!" A young human with vibrantly colored hair exclaimed, snapping a quick photo with a device Frangie couldn't begin to comprehend. "The texture on your skin is incredible. What did you use?" Frangie blinked in confusion. I beg your pardon? This is merely my natural epidermis, good sir or madam or other." The human laughed, clearly impressed. "Wow, you're really in character. Keep it up, dude." As the colorful-haired human disappeared into the crowd, Frangie's gaze was drawn to a large sign. "Vendor area this way." His salesman instincts, honed over centuries of hawking deadly weapons to dubious characters, kicked in. "Ah, perfect," he exclaimed, waddling towards the indicated direction. "Surely this must be where the galactic arms dealers congregate. Though I must say, security seems rather lax for such a gathering." Frangie made his way to the vendor area, marveling at the strange booths and displays. He found an empty table and began setting up his wares, carefully arranging his sample weapons and promotional materials. A portly human in a shirt adorned with spaceships approached, eyeing Frangie's display with interest. "Whoa, these props look super realistic. What are they made of?" Frangie puffed up with pride, always eager to discuss his products. "I assure you, good sir, these are no mere props. You are looking at the finest personal protection devices in the galaxy, courtesy of Smythe Vesson Armaments." The man's eyes widened with delight. "Man, you are committed to the bit. I love it. Tell me more about these weapons." Seizing the opportunity, Frangie launched into his sales pitch. "Well, let me draw your attention to our latest model of shoulder-mounted plasma cannon, capable of vaporizing a Kraxon battlecruiser at 50 parsecs, yet compact enough to fit in your average humanoid's closet." As Frangie continued his spiel, a small crowd gathered, oohing and ahhing over the incredibly detailed props. Before long, he had sold 2 shoulder-mounted weapons to a pair of burly humans who kept referring to something called LARP, a handheld immobilizer, to a shy young woman who mumbled something about cosplay photos, and, most impressively, a planetary defense cannon to an enthusiastic group who claimed to be making an indie sci-fi film. "Great gamma rays!" Frangie exclaimed as he counted his earnings. "I've never had such a successful sales run. These Earthlings are remarkably eager to arm themselves." The rest of the convention passed in a blur of excited customers, bewildering conversations, and more than a few uncomfortable moments when Frangie's biology betrayed him. His species' tendency to pass air biscuits when excited did not endear him to his booth neighbors. As the convention wound down, Frangie packed up his remaining inventory, brimming with pride at his successful mission. He waddled back to where he had left the beamer, patting his bulging pockets filled with Earth currency. "Grolthor will be pleased," he mused. "Perhaps this will finally earn me that corner office I've been eyeing for the past 3 centuries." With a wheeze and a sputter, the beamer roared to life, enveloping Frangie in a cocoon of malfunctioning technology. In a flash of light and a puff of ozone-scented smoke, he vanished from Earth, leaving behind only a scorch mark and a very confused convention center janitor. Moments later, or perhaps eons, time was a fickle thing when traveling via barely functional matter transportation, Frangie materialized in the transport bay of Smythe Vesson headquarters. He stumbled out of the beamer, his legs wobbling like overcooked noodles. "Home sweet home," he exclaimed, taking a deep breath of familiar weapon manufacturer-scented air. His moment of contentment was short-lived. A cacophony of alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility, and the transport bay was bathed in pulsating red light. Security breach! Unknown contaminant detected! A mechanized voice boomed over the intercom. Before Frangie could process what was happening, he found himself surrounded by a squad of heavily armed security drones, their weapons trained on his quivering form. "Wait," he cried, raising his stubby arms. "It's me, Frangie, your top salesman. Well, perhaps not top, but certainly in the upper quartile of—" His protests were cut short as a stasis field enveloped him, freezing him mid-gesture. Through the shimmering energy barrier, Frangie watched helplessly as a team of decontamination specialists in hazmat suits rushed into the room. Hours later, after being subjected to a battery of invasive tests and thoroughly uncomfortable decontamination procedures, a very disgruntled Frangie found himself seated in the plush office of Zixnar, the head of Smythe Vessen's interdimensional sales division. Zixnar, a being composed entirely of shimmering tentacles and disapproving glares, regarded Frangie with what passed for their species' expression of utter exasperation. "Frangie," Zixnar's voice reverberated through the room, each syllable dripping with barely contained fury. "Would you care to explain how you managed to not only miss your assigned destination by approximately 37,000 light-years, but also potentially contaminate our entire facility with unknown pathogens from a pre-contact civilization?" Frangie squirmed in his seat, acutely aware of how his gelatinous body made unpleasant squelching noises against the sleek office chair. "Well, you see, sir, there seems to have been a slight malfunction with the beamer, but on the bright side, I made some excellent sales." One of Zixnar's tentacles slammed against the desk, causing Frangie to jump. "Sales? Sales? You sold our advanced weaponry to a species that hasn't even achieved faster-than-light travel?" "In my defense," Frangie stammered, "they seemed quite knowledgeable about advanced technology. They kept discussing things like warp drives and photon torpedoes. I assumed they were simply eccentric in their presentation." Zixnar's body pulsated with barely contained rage. "Those are fictional concepts, you incompetent blob. You've been selling weapons of mass destruction at what appears to have been some sort of primitive entertainment gathering." Frangie's face fell, his gray skin taking on an even more ashen hue. "Oh dear, I don't suppose a heartfelt apology would suffice." "An apology?" Zixnar's tentacles writhed in fury. "Do you have any idea of the potential consequences of your actions? We could be facing galactic sanctions, not to mention the possibility of altering the entire developmental trajectory of a young species." Frangie sank lower in his chair, wishing he could melt into a puddle and ooze away. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather serious." Zixnar's tentacles suddenly went still, a sure sign that they were deep in thought. After a moment of tense silence, they spoke again, their tone ominously calm. "There's only one way to salvage this situation, Frangie. You're going back." Frangie's eyes widened in horror. "Back? To Earth? But sir, surely there are more qualified—" "You created this mess," Zixnar interrupted, "and you're going to fix it. You will return to Earth, locate the weapons you sold, and retrieve them by any means necessary." But, Frangie sputtered, his mind reeling at the prospect. "How am I supposed to blend in? I can barely navigate our own society, let alone a primitive alien culture." Zixnar's tentacles waved dismissively. "That's your problem to solve. You have 24 hours to prepare. After that, you're being sent back to Earth with minimal equipment. We can't risk any more of our technology falling into human hands." Fran G slumped in defeat, his body practically melting off the chair. I don't suppose I have a choice in the matter? Your only choices, Zixnar replied coldly, are to accept this mission or face immediate termination. And I don't mean of your employment. With a pitiful whimper, Frangi nodded his acquiescence. As he waddled out of Zixnar's office, his mind raced with the impossible task ahead. How was he, a bumbling salesman from an ancient, nearly extinct species, supposed to navigate the perils of Earth and retrieve advanced weapons from a civilization he barely understood? Little did Frangi know that his misadventures on Earth were only just beginning, and that this mission would lead him on a journey of self-discovery, unlikely friendships, and perhaps even a chance to redeem his long-lost species in the eyes of the galaxy. As the door to Zixnar's office slid shut behind him, Frangi let out a long, quavering sigh. Well, he muttered to himself, I suppose things can't get any worse. The universe, as it often does, took that as a challenge. Frangi stood before the temperamental beamer, his gelatinous form quivering with trepidation. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of hasty preparations and increasingly dire warnings from Smythe Vessan's legal department. Remember, droned a monotonous voice from a nearby speaker, under no circumstances are you to reveal your true nature or the existence of extraterrestrial life to the humans. Failure to comply will result in immediate, well, you know. Frangi gulped, his throat making an unpleasant squelching sound. Yes, I understand, though I must say your constant reminders of my potential demise are doing little for my morale. Morale is not a concern, the voice replied flatly. Retrieval of our proprietary technology is the only objective. Now, step into the beamer. With a resigned sigh, Frangi waddled into the device. I don't suppose there's any chance of a last-minute equipment upgrade? Perhaps a personal shield? Or at least some snacks for the trip? The only response was the ominous hum of the beamer powering up. Frangi closed his eyes, bracing himself for the jarring journey ahead. Here we go again, he muttered. Beam me down, Scotty, whoever you are. In a flash of light and a puff of ozone-scented smoke, Frangi vanished from the Smythe Vessan headquarters. Moments later, he rematerialized with an unceremonious plop in a dingy alley behind the Boston Convention Center. The first thing that hit him was the smell, a pungent mixture of decay, exhaust fumes, and something that might have been considered food in less discerning circles. Great galaxies, Frangi wheezed, his sensitive olfactory glands overwhelmed, and I thought the Boglodite swamps were bad. As he stumbled out of the alley, Frangi's hopes for a quick and easy retrieval mission were promptly dashed. The bustling convention center he had left just days ago was now a ghost town. Where once there had been a sea of colorful costumes and excited chatter, now there were only a few bored-looking workers dismantling the last of the displays. Excuse me, Frangi called out to a passing worker, trying his best to sound casual. Might I inquire as to the whereabouts of the, cosplayers who were here recently, particularly those who may have purchased some rather unique props? The worker gave Frangi a long, suspicious look. Convention ended 2 days ago, buddy. Everyone's long gone. And what's with the getup? Halloween's not for months. Frangi blinked in confusion. Halloween? I'm not familiar with that planetary system. The worker rolled his eyes. Right. Well, good luck with whatever this is. He walked away, muttering something about weirdos and getting too old for this job. Panic began to set in as Frangi realized the full scope of his predicament. He was stranded on an alien world with no leads, no resources, and no idea how to even begin his impossible mission. As if on cue, the beamer behind him gave a pathetic whine and then vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving behind only a scorched patch of concrete. "No, no, no!" Frangie wailed, his stubby arms flailing in distress. "Come back! You can't leave me here!" But it was too late. His only link to home, unreliable as it was, had abandoned him. Frangie slumped against the wall of the convention center, his gelatinous body slowly sliding down until he was a pitiful puddle on the sidewalk. "This is it," he moaned. "The end of Frangie, last of the mighty Globians, reduced to a sad smear on an alien world. Perhaps some future archaeologist will find my fossilized remains and marvel at the strange blob that once roamed these lands." As Frangie wallowed in his despair, he failed to notice the approaching footsteps. It wasn't until a shadow fell over him that he looked up, blinking his bulbous eyes in surprise. Standing before him was a human female, her brow furrowed with concern. She was tall by Frangie's standards, though most beings were, with wild curly hair and eyes that seemed to sparkle with curiosity. "Hey there," she said, her voice gentle. "Are you okay? You look like you're having a rough day." Frangie stared at her, momentarily forgetting his universal translator in his shock. After a moment, he remembered to activate it and managed to stammer out a response. I'm afraid I find myself in quite a predicament, good madam. Lost, you might say, far from home." The woman's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm Sarah, by the way. Can I help you somehow? Do you need me to call someone?" A strange sensation began to stir within Frangie. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in eons, not since the days when his species was respected and admired across the galaxy. It was hope. As he gazed up at Sarah, something deep within his ancient DNA began to awaken. It was as if the kindness in her eyes had triggered a long-dormant part of his being, reminding him of the nobility and resilience that had once defined his people. With an effort that seemed almost Herculean, Frangie pulled himself together, quite literally, as his gelatinous form had begun to spread alarmingly across the sidewalk. He drew himself up to his full height, an unimpressive 1.5 meters, and managed what he hoped was a winning smile. "Sarah," he said, his raspy voice filled with newfound determination, "I would be eternally grateful for any assistance you could provide. My name is Frangie, and I find myself in need of a guide in this strange land." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "Frangie, that's an interesting name, and quite a costume you've got there. Were you part of the convention?" Frangie hesitated, remembering the warnings about revealing his true nature. Yes, the convention. Precisely. I was performing as a character. A very convincing alien character, wouldn't you agree?" Sarah chuckled. "Well, I've got to hand it to you. It's one of the most impressive makeups I've ever seen. The way your skin moves is incredible. Are you some kind of special effects artist?" "Something like that," Frangie replied, seizing on the opportunity. "In fact, I'm trying to track down some, props that I lent out during the convention. Very valuable props. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Oh, were you the one with that amazing weapons display? I heard people talking about it, but I didn't get a chance to see it myself. Apparently some guy bought a whole set for his indie film project." Frangie's hearts, all three of them, leapt. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Do you know where I might find this indie film person?" Sarah pulled out her phone, tapping away at the screen. "Let me check the convention forums. Sometimes people post about their purchases. Ah, here we go. Looks like the guy's name is Derek Blastoid, probably a screen name. He posted about starting production on his sci-fi epic next week, just outside of town. Fran G could hardly contain his excitement. Sarah, you are a marvel, a beacon of hope in this confusing world. How can I ever repay you for this kindness? Sarah laughed, a warm sound that made Fran G's gelatinous insides wobble in an unfamiliar but not unpleasant way. No need for all that. But hey, if you're going to be in town for a while, maybe I could show you around. I'm always happy to help out a fellow sci-fi enthusiast. As Fran G looked at Sarah, he felt something stirring deep within him. It was more than just gratitude or relief. It was a connection, a spark of something that he hadn't felt in millennia. In that moment, he made a decision that would change the course of his life and potentially the fate of two worlds. Sarah, he said, his voice filled with a warmth that surprised even him. I would be honored to accept your offer. Perhaps you'd like to assist me in my prop retrieval mission? I have a feeling it might be quite the adventure. Sarah's eyes sparkled with excitement. An adventure, you say? Count me in. But first, let's get you something to eat. You look like you could use a good meal. As Sarah led him away from the convention center, chatting animatedly about the best places to get out-of-this-world tacos, Fran G felt a sense of optimism he hadn't experienced in centuries. Yes, he was still stranded on an alien world with an impossible mission. Yes, he was risking life and limb, or whatever the gelatinous equivalent was, by involving a human in his quest. And yes, there was still the very real possibility of being vaporized by his employers if he failed. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Fran G didn't feel alone. As he waddled along beside his new human friend, he allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps this mission wouldn't be a total disaster after all. Perhaps, just perhaps, it might be the beginning of something extraordinary. Little did Fran G know that his adventure was only just beginning. The quest to retrieve the weapons would take him on a journey across Earth, facing challenges he could never have imagined. From outsmarting overzealous cosplayers to navigating the perils of human social media, from discovering the joys of Earth cuisine, particularly a certain gelatinous dessert that made him feel oddly cannibalistic, to learning the intricacies of human emotions, Fran G's mission would become a transformative experience. And through it all, Sarah would be by his side, her curiosity and kindness serving as a beacon in the strange world of humans. As their friendship deepened, Fran G would find himself questioning everything he thought he knew about his place in the universe. But for now, as they walked down the busy Boston street, Fran G's mind was focused on more immediate concerns. Sarah, he said hesitantly, I don't suppose these tacos you mentioned are compatible with a primarily methane-based digestive system? Sarah's laughter rang out, turning heads as they passed. Oh, Fran G, she grinned. Something tells me life is about to get very interesting with you around. Fran G couldn't have agreed more. As they disappeared into the crowd, the last of the Globians felt, for the first time in eons, that he might have found a place where he truly belonged. The adventure, it seemed, was just beginning. Thank you for listening to this story. We would like to express our gratitude to Ron Cindric for providing the concept and idea for this tale, which we were delighted to bring to life and transform into a narrative. We hope this story has not disappointed Ron or you, our dear audience. This is intended to be the first part of a 6-part series. Please let us know if you enjoyed the story and would like to hear more of Fran G's adventures on Earth. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and will help us determine whether to continue with the remaining parts of this exciting sci-fi comedy.